The UN is all about sex, seriously. The UN is pro-prostitution. The UN is pro-legalized drugs. You take this money, you have to now open an abortion clinic. So countries that are very anti-abortion are stuck between a rock and a hard place of saying we need money to develop, which is Africa's case. But yet if we do, they want us to put CSC in our schools. UNFPA, the Population Fund of the UN, which basically is another word for abortion. They want the population of the world to be a tiny fraction of what it is right now. Do you see what they're trying to do? They're admitting it here. So if you think it doesn't affect your life, it absolutely does. And if you think the correct way, then you're okay. And if you don't, then we're going to fight you. The program was really that great. Why do you have to pay people to do it? They will make money off the hormones. They will make money off the chest binders and the surgeries, the lifetime hormone supplements, and then the psychiatrist to help them because this thing's messed them up. They don't like the word family at all. He got these parents to agree to have raised that one son as a girl. They want to control your children. They want you to not have children, and if you do have children, they belong to them. If they can get enough people thinking this way, they can change governments.
Before we start, one little thing. This video is about to be suppressed like never before. Why? Because we're about to expose United Nations corruption and perversion. That's why I need you to do these three little things. Number one, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Number two, please leave a comment below and like this video right now. And number three, just share this video with all your friends, peers, and loved ones. And now, let's get back to the podcast. Let me properly introduce you, April. April Gallart is a director, United Nations Mission Relations and Commissions on the Status of Women, CSW coordinator. She attends CSW every year and coordinates United Families International, UFI, pro-family organization team members visits with delegations from around the world. April often serves as mission leader on many of these visits, during which UFI team members present materials which assist ambassadors and counselors in promoting the inclusion of family-friendly language in UN documents. April maintains and develops relations with missions and delegates throughout the year. April is bilingual and speaks English and Spanish. She worked as a bilingual elementary school teacher for 2 years and frequently uses her Spanish speaking ability during mission visits. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish from CSU Long Beach and a California teacher's credential. Issues that she is passionate about include parental rights and religious freedom. She and her husband Henry have 4 children. April is a woman of God. Welcome to the show. So April, obviously we came here to almost Sacramento just to talk about the United Nations and everything that is going on right there. So I'm asking this, and I would like to talk about this because I'm from a little country, Lithuania, and I always tell my fellow Americans that if you fail here in the US, the other countries follow, especially the little ones, just like mine, right? So if you fail here in the America, in the US, in 2, 3, 5 years, we're going to fail there in Lithuania. So I've heard some horrific stories about the United Nations and everything that they do. But at the same time, you hear those stories that United Nations, they help people around the world, right? They help poor African countries. So they help Africa for 50 years. But Africa is still in shambles, right? So I've got like a question: what are they doing for those 50 plus years, since the whole continent is still in shambles? So I would like to start with United Nations is basically what, and what is the structure of this huge organization?
The United Nations began after World War II in 1945. In fact, when you go down to New York City, you can actually see these plaques on the sidewalk that say what month and year every member state, as they call it, or country joined. Mm-hmm. Pretty much every country in the world at this point is a member state at the UN. They have an ambassador for each country that is chosen by the president or prime minister of that country. And that ambassador is in charge of a mission for that country. So the Lithuanian ambassador would have a Lithuanian delegation. Mm-hmm. They have offices in New York City. There's another UN in Geneva, but the largest one is in New York City. And they have delegates. So they have a whole structure of people that cover various different types of issues or concerns that that country wants to deal with. Typically, there's, depending on the size of the country, is the size of the mission. So like the U.S. mission is humongous. Mm-hmm. And they've got, I don't know, hundreds of people that work for that mission. Then you'll have a smaller country like Lithuania might have 20. including the ambassador. So they'll send the ambassador, and they live in New York City a good portion of the year. They have a month or two where they kind of go home. So the ambassador, the delegates will go home for a period of time. They serve from anywhere from a year to 6-7 years. I've seen some of them serve. There's no real standard. Every country kind of decides on whether they want that person to be replaced.
No term limits.
No. And the ambassadorship is literally based on the leader of that country, like our President Trump, who's already chosen his person, who has, not for the UN, but he's chosen ambassadors to other countries. So just like you have an ambassador to Israel, an ambassador to the UN, you have an ambassador to everywhere. So they have an ambassador to the UN he hasn't named yet. So they get together. The UN initially was begun under the auspices of, we are trying to make sure we never have another world war. They wanted countries to get together and speak so that we didn't have that atrocity, because it happened twice in a very short amount of time.
That was World War I, World War II.
Yes, that was the beginning idea behind the United Nations. Shortly after it started, and since then it's not that at all. They come together. Basically, what happens now is they come together at different times of the year for different conferences. So the one that was mentioned in my bio was this conference on the status of women. We go to that one typically every year because it specifically involves the family. We go and we help. So they have documents that the UN works on, and at the UN, for them to pass something as far as UN-approved document, UN-approved language, every country has to agree. They have to have consensus across the board. So the interesting thing is
every country?
Yes.
And how many countries there are? Almost 200.
Hundreds. Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody's a country except, the Vatican and Palestine.
So even North Korea is in UN?
I don't know if they are, actually. Maybe North Korea.
And it's possible to have a consensus across 200 countries. How often is that?
Well, like I mentioned before, but I'll mention again here, is a lot of the countries have learned over now to vote in blocks. So like all of the European Union countries, the EU countries, all vote as a block. So Lithuania doesn't get their own vote. Their vote goes under the EU. All of the African countries, there's an African delegation. There's a Middle Eastern delegation. There's a South Pacific delegation.
So to have a vote from EU, 51% of the country, they vote, and then 51%, if there is consensus, then the vote from the EU comes to the UN, right?
Yeah,
right?
and then say the EU all supports this. And so you could have people who are member states of the EU who don't necessarily, like a lot of things that have happened over the last few years. Hungary was an outspoken critic of a lot of things the EU was doing, but they didn't have the power to change their vote at the UN because they vote as a bloc.
I got you.
So they basically come together and they vote on language to put in a document. So the document might be, let's say it's UNFPA, the Population Fund of the UN, which basically is another word for abortion. That's what they want to control population. That's what it means. They
say that once again.
UNFPA, which President Trump in his first term actually completely defunded, because they get like $60 million something a year from the U.S.
To do what?
To promote population control. Now, if you look at their website, that's not what it's going to say, but that's what they do. And so they come in with, so basically, let's say there's a conference. Let's take CSW. They'll have a document that'll say something to the effect of, we need to make sure that women and girls have equal opportunity. For what? Equal opportunity. And again, sometimes it's often broad. The delegates will all come together and then they'll start voicing their opinions. They'll talk on the side. They'll come, they come in this general assembly room and they have different people make statements on their position, and they'll get instructions from their capitals on how they want them to respond. The delegates and the ambassadors are just arms of their capital. They're supposed to copy what the capital tells them to say. So it should come from legislation in their home country. But if they're voting as a bloc, it gets a little more complicated. So in that process of all that negotiation, there's a lot of stuff that happens on the side. So you'll have like a lot of NGOs are at the UN. We're an NGO. A lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are at the UN, and they're all putting their influence, trying to put influence on the delegates and on the ambassadors to vote in their favor. Depending on the NGO, like International Planned Parenthood Federation has a massive influence at the UN. They do presentations with delegates all the time. There was a few years ago, I think it was 2018, I was meeting with a delegate, and I was told she was new. And she said, at the time that thing was going on with David Dilaudin with the Planned Parenthood videos where he was exposing that they were selling fetal baby parts. And I was talking about that with her, and she didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, well, don't believe me. Go look online. There's videos and evidence about this. She said, well, that's very interesting because I'm about to meet with Planned Parenthood next. And so they meet with the delegates just like we do. They're trying to get their agenda pushed through into these documents. So when this document achieves consensus, what they fight over are pieces of language at this point because the documents are already in place. So like if you've heard of Declaration on the Rights of the Child, that's a big one that a lot of people have heard of. Convention Against Violence Against Women. There's another one about CEDAW, like convention, I forgot what it's called, but if you look up CEDAW, there's a whole convention on that. There's different agreements that they've done in the past. So they'll come to these conferences and try to renegotiate bits and pieces of these language and these agreements. And it's a lot of intense, often bickering of, we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. And their hope is to come out with some kind of document that everybody agreed to. And then people always often ask me, how does UN policy affect me in my country? So let's say I'm in the United States. It doesn't affect my life. People will tell me that. I said, well, actually it does. So in this country in general, but in California particularly, in 2016, they legalized comprehensive sexuality education in schools. They did it very quietly. I didn't even find out about it till 2018. So that's how, and I had my finger on the pulse of something no one knew. My children's own school district in Southern California had already adopted. They signed right away, came down from the state, oh, you got to do this. The interesting thing about that whole thing is when I heard that, we've been fighting CSE at the UN already for a while, a long time. So all those ideas came from there. So if you think it doesn't affect your life, it absolutely does. The whole term globalism that people talk about today, that's UN. They want the world to be one government, one way of doing things. It's communism, right? Everybody's the same. You can't have your own traditions or culture. You have to do things one way, and one way is right. That's where DEI comes from. That's where social emotional learning or mindfulness comes from. All of this is you have to think. There's a certain approved, it's a group think, right? There's a certain way that's approved that you should think. And if you think the correct way, then you're okay. And if you don't, then we're going to fight you. And so that's kind of how it works. If I hope I explained that enough.
But if they want to do globalism, if they want to implement globalism, globalist ideas to the entire world, why all those ideas are so perverted? Why then can be just normal pro-family?
I years ago, I started going to the UN in 2013. United Families International has been around much longer than that. I think it started in the late 70s.
Yes.
And it was started by a woman who was going to some meetings, found out some things were going on, and kind of just grew from there. And she was just saying, I believe in the family. That's another thing they will fight you on. They don't like the word family at all. In fact, I often say the F word at the UN is family, literally. If that word is in any document, Western countries will fight tooth and nail to get it out.
Can you give me an example?
So if they'll say, we need to make sure that women and girls have an opportunity to go to university. There's a program right now that I just found out about. I emailed this country's delegate, and I said, did you know that there's an agreement between the UNFPA, again, and a company based in your country? And those two people are working together to teach the youth to go out and teach sexual health and reproductive rights, which is term for abortion, okay? There's a prize, they can win a contest. So there's all this pressure, right? So if they come back after doing something like that and they put a document in there saying, women and girls need an opportunity, like I said, to receive an education. Okay, well, they're going to say, okay, well, the girls can't receive an education in certain countries if they're pregnant. So they'll say, okay, we have to introduce SRHR, which is Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. It's code for abortion, but they use it as they need birth control. Because if they get pregnant, then they have to drop out of school. And therefore, there's an unmet need. And so all of a sudden, this whole conversation about abortion comes in. Well, they don't like the word family for two reasons. Probably more, but two I can think of. One, the family for them, they don't like the word the family. So especially the Latin American countries always say there are multiple forms of family. And so therefore they want same-sex couples to be considered families. They want single-parent families to be considered families. They want grandparents who are raising grandchildren to be considered families. It's kind of like anything else. When you start kind of widening the definition to something, it can include anything. So they don't like the word the family because when we talk about that, we're talking about the nuclear family, the mother, father, children.
Yes.
And they feel that that's exclusive. They don't like that. It doesn't include the LGBT. It doesn't include different groupings of people that are living together. They think as long as you're living under one roof, you're a family.
That's why they came out with Proposition 3 in California.
Yes. Yeah. And so if you don't agree with that, as anything else, you're a bad person. And so...
so this is reason number one. What's the reason number two?
The reason number two is because the family, and this is something they won't admit, but the family is the structure that holds everything together. So, for instance, think about the whole trans thing going on in this country right now. Okay, people ask, why are they pushing so hard on these kids? Because years ago, depending on how old you are, you'll remember this, they came after the adults' way of thinking. You know, you need to accept this. You need to accept this. How about this? They found out after a while it wasn't really succeeding very well because by the time you become an adult over 25, you kind of know how you think and you know what you think is right or wrong and your mind is a little more set. Children are much more vulnerable. They're very open to adults being the authority. And so if someone as an adult says, hey, if you don't like how things are going in your family, and you've seen this already where you have teachers have a sign on their door that says, hey, you can come talk to me anytime. I won't say a word. It'll be just, be confidential. You have social media influencers saying this. We'll be your family. We'll be your rainbow family. And so the whole thing of family is a deterrent to their efforts to control your children. Because if they have a family, I always say, if you have family and faith, you have a really good support structure. Okay, when you take one of those or both of those away, that child is very vulnerable to all sorts of things. Influence and suggestion, trafficking, completely leaving their family thinking, oh, I have these people who will affirm who I am, who are going to accept who I am. So that's why they don't like that word, because it takes apart their structure of power.
Is there a head of the UN?
Yeah.
One person?
Yeah.
He's from one country?
It changes, and I don't even know how the voting process works. But yeah, they do have a new person that comes up every certain number of years. But that person is kind of like a figurehead. There's not a whole lot that person really does as far as power that person holds. A lot of it's in the UN agencies. So like I mentioned, UNFPA, UNICEF, the WHO, the World Bank, IMF, International Monetary Fund.
Yeah, and those are all what?
UN AIDS. Those are all UN agencies. So they're under the umbrella of the UN.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
What about NATO? NATO was 1954?
NATO's different, but NATO and the EU and, if you know about Klaus Schwab and the WEF, they all think the same way.
My favorite people.
Okay. They all think the same way, is that we want you to do it our way. So again, it's communism, right? It's like, you need to think this way. This is the approved way. If you don't think this way, you'll be punished. And that's how they think. And so when you have these smaller countries come in, you mentioned Africa. African nations for a very long time have been the guinea pigs of these agencies. Even poor South American, Central American countries as well. So if they want to do a trial on second trimester abortions, it's very easy to go through an NGO, use a UN agency, use the IMF, offer some money to study a certain thing, and they'll say, well, if you take this money, you have to now open an abortion clinic. So countries that are very anti-abortion are stuck between a rock and a hard place of saying we need money to develop, which was Africa's case. But yet if we do, they want us to put CSE in our schools. And so for a while it worked. And the African nations said, well, we need the money, we need the money, we need the money. So they take the money, put it in their schools. And then like in 2017, it started to turn. And in fact, families in Africa started coming up and voicing their concern over what these policies were doing to their children. And yet if you look at any of the stated objectives of these agencies, we're trying to promote the health and well-being of all Africans. But they didn't talk to the shareholders themselves, which is the parents, right? They didn't talk to them. They didn't talk to the tribal leaders in the villages. They talked to the NGOs and the government officials who are willing to listen, those people who are willing to be paid for implementing programs. So I always say, if the program was really that great, why do you have to pay people to do it? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, if it was really that great, and they love this term unmet need. There was an unmet need for reproductive health care. And that's always, as you know, a term for abortion. Okay. It also engenders the whole thing of gender, right? That's under that influence as well, that whole umbrella. So the whole thing there is the same. It's all to separate. Because if you can get a kid to think, maybe I'm not a girl. Maybe I should explore this. Well, the parents aren't going to support that. Mm-hmm. And so for that child to follow that path, they need someone to carry them down that path. So that's why they got the schools involved. They got the school counselors involved. They got the local, every high school, middle school now has a gay straight alliance club. You know, there's adults that are in charge of those things. And all these people are shepherding these kids along this path. And not once do they ever tell these children.
Gay straight alliance club? What is that?
They're called GSA clubs. They're in pretty much every high school, middle school in the nation, public school. So they have like an advisor of the school that's supposed to be in charge of it. They're supposed to be present at their meetings. They usually happen during lunch, so it's not during school hours or after school. And they'll have different presenters come in and present at different times. Well, who gets to control who comes in? And so the whole thing is to make the gay and straight kids be friends. What do you think they're really talking about? Do they need to have this club all the time to make sure gay and straight kids can be friends, or are they bringing in other influencers to talk to the kids? In a lot of cases, that's the case. And the kids come out of there with all sorts of thoughts. I mean, when they were doing CSE down in, when I lived in Southern California, there were kids coming out of those lessons that were mandated by the state, looking at each other and saying, I didn't know you could do that. So just like that, with these GSA club meetings, what are they telling them? Are they bringing in Planned Parenthood people? Very possibly, but we don't know, right? Because it's just a club.
So I don't care whether a person is gay, lesbian, bi,
I don't either.
Black, Asian. Yeah. I don't care at all.
It doesn't matter. So it's all a pretense to say, to make it look like there's this big fight between gay kids and straight kids, and we got to make sure they have an alliance. So we're going to have this special meeting so they can come together and be friends. And I'm thinking, you have one adult in charge, and who has oversight of that adult? No one. Technically the principal, but does the principal check in? Probably not in most cases. So what's actually being spoken about in those meetings?
Give me a few examples for the parents that are watching right now of sex education. What sex education is like in schools? So comprehensive sexuality education, and there's a big difference on the fact that they use sexuality, not sexual. Because when I was a kid, it was sex ed, sexual education. Now it's sexuality education. Back in your school times, what did they teach you? Because
they taught reproduction. They taught girls have periods. You're going to grow, certain changes in your body. And
only girls had periods back then.
Yes,
that's crazy.
I know.
Those were ancient times.
I know. It was very bigoted. I admit, we were separated, girls and boys, and that's how it was. And so you didn't talk about those things, and it was usually a film, and they might have, but they didn't have all these activities or exercises like they do now. Now all the kids are together, the sexes are together, because to them there is no gender.
Because there are 90 plus genders. Right.
Well, and gender itself is not really a real term. There are two sexes.
Yes.
Male and female.
Is there a difference like sex and gender?
Gender is a made-up word. Gender is a word made up by John Money in the 60s. He came up with the word gender. And he took the twin boys. If you look it up, Dr. John Money took these twin boys, and one of the boys had a botched circumcision. And in the process, his genitalia was almost completely destroyed. I don't know what happened, but it went really wrong. So he came in, the parents were like, what do we do? What do we do? And I don't know how, I don't all the details of how he got involved. It's been a while since I read the story, but he got these parents to agree to have raised that one son as a girl.
What?
And so he did this experiment on these poor boys. He didn't know how it was going to turn out. He just wanted to see.
He was a doctor?
Yeah. Well, he's Dr. John Money, but I mean, he was more like, he wasn't a practicing doctor in the hospital. He was, I believe he was a psychologist or psychiatrist or something like that, which there's nothing wrong with those people. I'm just saying in this case, he wasn't in charge of those babies' health. It was talking to the parents about what to do with this situation they were presented with. Well, both of those boys ended up having really severe mental health issues down the line.
Both of them.
And the boy that was made to think he was a girl, when he found out, he went back to being a boy. He always felt like he didn't feel right wearing dresses. He didn't feel like him. Anyway, that's where gender came from. You can look it up.
I always thought like sex and gender. I always thought that this is the same thing.
Yeah.
So they're saying
genders. That's why they're able to use it, because they can say it's just a feeling. It's just how I'm feeling today. Today I feel like a boy. Today I feel like a girl. And so all of this stuff of, instead of saying, you know what, I mean, a lot of times children, when they're little, will ask, you tell them, you're my girl, I love you. You're my son, I love you so much. Now it's the child gets to decide, right? So again, think about the UN. They don't want the parents getting in the way and telling their child that you're a boy. So that gender came in as a way to say, well, you don't know what gender they are, because gender's fluid. No, it's not. No, there's two sexes, and that's all it's ever been. But then they'll bring up the intersex and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, all this thinking comes from the UN of saying that, again, there's one way to think. Gender's not binary. Gender's not biological. I mean, there was who's a Montana congressperson who in their state just recently who's transgender, and said that, which is not a real word anyway, and said that I am just as biologically female as the cis women. Well, I'm not a cis woman. I'm a woman.
First of all,
cis is not a thing. That's not what I do. But this all came in as a way to control, because if you get a kid hooked on the hormones, you get a kid hooked on the chest binders or all the stuff that they do, the little packs they give the girls to look like a boy. They have male genitalia. They do them for children, age 5 and under. You can get one for that size and put it in their pants to make them feel like they're a boy.
Male genitalia? Mm-hmm.
It's so rubber, plastic, whatever.
Just to be flat?
Yeah. So they'll bind their chest with like just a really tight, kind of like they'll use when you go in and get blood drawn and they wrap with the bandage. They'll just bandage it really tightly around the chest to make them look not curvy like a girl. And they get the kids hooked on all this thinking. And then the parents try to intervene and say, wait, what's happening to my kid? And next thing you know, it's either pulling the children away from the family. There's a lot that's going on in the world. What's going on at our border is the same way. You have these children being separated from the parent, coming up with a coyote into this country and then being trafficked.
359,000.
Do the parents know that they're being trafficked? I don't know. But why are they sending these children up with no parents? And the whole thing is to separate, right? Because the influence of the parents and the influence of that family structure and the security and the foundation that gives a child, that is their worst enemy.
What are they so afraid of?
They're afraid that they won't be able to make money off of your kid. It's all about money.
Really?
And power.
But they've got billions. Some people, I believe they even have trillions.
But if they can get enough people thinking this way, they can change governments. So you see where it's going? It's going all towards that global end of we're in charge. They want power centralized.
So not the money, power.
Power, but they need money to have power. So it goes together. So getting the parents out of the way, getting religion out of the way. They'll put they even have said that Planned Parenthood has documents where they call parents a barrier. They call religion a barrier.
A barrier to what?
A barrier to you being your true self. A barrier to you having the freedom to have. They're even a barrier to your rights. They use the word rights all the time. You notice in this last election cycle, they talked about, and that people still are talking about now, Trump's going to take away all your rights. because they know that gets people upset. I've heard that at the UN so many times. They're going to take away your rights. Your rights, your rights, your rights. There was a presentation I went to my very first year I went, and I remember just being stunned. It was a man from the Netherlands, a young man, and a young woman from India. Now, India is a pretty private, conservative country historically. It's changing now a little bit more because probably some of the reasons we talked about, the money and the programs and all of that. And the young woman got up there, and you expected the young man from the Netherlands to talk about how, we all need to be able to do what we want, and, condoms everywhere and all of that. And by the way, their parting gift when you went out the door was a basket full of condoms that you could pick from. So that was real. That was my first dive in. Anyway, this woman from India said, when I was growing up, I had questions about my body. I had questions about things about sex. And in India, it's very frowned upon to talk about. Parents don't really talk about it with you. It's private. And so my rights were denied because no one was telling me anything about this in school. So even then, they were using that terminology because they know people get upset when they find out someone's rights are being denied. Wait a minute.
A right to what? To know?
A right to have the freedom to make choices about your body with no repercussions. That's what they really are all about. There was a quote from one of their conferences in 1995. I think it was I'm going to get the name wrong, so I'm going to have to think about it. I don't want to say it wrong, but there was an agreement back then, and it was never, it was just a side conference. It wasn't a UN conference. It was a conference where a lot of countries were there, and they were trying to get this approved by a lot of people, but it didn't get where they wanted it to go eventually at the UN level. But there was a quote in there where he said that women need the freedom to be sexual without the burden of forced motherhood. They need to have their freedom to explore their sexuality and their sexual desires without the burden. So this is the words they use. The burden of forced motherhood. How is that forced? You engage in an activity that has a certain outcome. No one forced you, but they make it all about that's why the abortion people always say what they do is to say that, no one should tell us what to do with our bodies. No one told you what to do with your body before you got pregnant. And those are choices that are made, right? But it's all about someone's not going to let me have my right to do what I want with my body. And so that's why those arguments are very effective on an emotional level. And the UN is all about emotion. All.
But why do they target profoundly women? It's easier to persuade?
I'm not sure. My own personal opinion, I think, is that women tend to be more of the bleeding heart in general. We tend to want to help people. We want to make sure someone's okay. It's the mothering instinct in us, I think, is we want to make sure, you're sad about this? Okay, we need to fix this. Let's put a policy in place. I think that's why they also denigrate men, because a strong man, a strong father is horrible for what they're trying to do, because the father's not going to let his children go, change clothing and put on dresses of another gender and go and do surgeries, right? Father's not going to do that. So men think differently. Men are very more black and white, like that's a no. Women are a little more like, oh, well.
But if your son wants to cut off his penis, he's going to get to use it in the future. Yeah. Just for you to have grandsons and granddaughters. Well, they also see a lot of times, they see that men are, as I said, men are the aggressors, men are the enemies. And so they've really made men out to be this, toxic masculinity they always talk about. And so they're trying to make women in charge. You notice that happens a lot. And so that's why the abortion argument. Men don't have any say in that. It's the woman's my body. Well, it took two people to make that baby. It's 50-50, yeah. So, genome. Now, a lot of women would say, well, a lot of men don't want the responsibility, and that's true. But a lot of women don't either. Why did you sleep with him in the first place? Well, yeah, that's how, there were choices that were made. Now, I understand there are some situations where you did everything you were supposed to and you still got pregnant. But they always love to use those few situations to expand it to everyone. Rape, incest. Condom got... Life of the mother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Life of the mother, yeah. Well, and the U.S. we have the most permissive abortion regulations in this country in the whole world. The European countries don't have as permissive as we do. Oh, really?
No, you can look it up. You can look that up online. Look up what are the, I think the UN keeps track of it. What are your rules for access, how many weeks can you abort a baby? And we are one of the most permissive.
So let's take 100% of the UN delegates. How many percentage-wise are men and women? It's not 50-50, right?
Probably it might be 40-60 men to women. I mean, it's not as many women as you would think.
So men dictate women what to do, so women could make their own decision.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense.
No. Well, and this conference that we go to, that used to be called the Conference on the Status of Women, CSW. It's never changed, but now it's always women and girls. So again, like I said, why did they add the girls in there? Why did they add the girls? They want access. I tell people this all the time. They want to control your children. They want you to not have children, and if you do have children, they belong to them. That's how it is. The UN is pro-prostitution. The UN is pro-legalized drugs.
Well, they're not saying pro-prostitution, right? They're saying like pro-choice. I have a choice what to do with my body.
You should be able to have sexual freedom without the burden of forced motherhood. That's how they think.
Even if you get paid for sex.
Yeah.
Do you have any stats or, I want to say, the outcomes of prostitution being legalized in the European countries?
I don't have stats on that, but there was something interesting that I highlighted here because I was sending it out a little bit ago. There was a new delegate. So the UN has these special rapporteurs, right? And these special rapporteurs are over all sorts of different topics, issues. So this one I sent out in September to a few countries that just to let them know. There's a coalition of American states, they call it, and it's like Central South America. And they had a new commissioner, it's called OAS, on the rights of sex workers, said that sex work is just as worthy as any other kind of work. The issue with this request, and thus the new commissioner who was appointed, is that these resolutions fail to address how to help women exit this industry and in fact tend to legalize prostitution. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women recently published a report strongly condemning the practice and promotion of prostitution, yet the groups praising this new commissioner are denouncing the report. So think about that. Why you see why they hate the family? Would any father, any mother say,
Never.
I would like you to be a prostitute? No. I would like you to be a sex worker. That's my dream. No. I would like you to go and use drugs while you're being a sex worker. No. No parent is ever going to say that. The parents are the gatekeepers, truly. They call them the barrier. I call it the gatekeepers. And they're there for a reason. If you have a child, you have that child and you want to protect your child. You want to train your child. You want to teach your child. They don't want you doing that because you will teach them wrong think. You will teach them the things you believe. And then they'll say your child is bigoted or racist. Your child is a hateful person because they don't accept all these lifestyles and these different decisions that they're making. So they have their program and the family is standing in their way, which is why they fight against it, even in documents on the family. They'll fight. They wanted to put SRHR in a document on the family. The family has protected rights under UN resolutions in the past, and every single time it comes up, they try to change the language again. They tried to add SRHR, which they're trying to say that is essential for the family to survive. How is abortion essential for a family to survive? You can't form a family with abortion.
It's anti-family.
And I found this out from a man I met doing advocacy work in the state who was I believe a psychiatrist, and he said he had counseled so many women who'd had abortions who were really, really struggling emotionally with their feelings about what happened. And he said, something I didn't know, and I've said this to a few people and they didn't know it either, that once you've had 2 or 3 abortions, I don't know what the number is, different for everyone probably, you become unable to carry a pregnancy full term because your body starts to learn, oh, pregnancy is supposed to interrupt. And so it'll, in some cases, from scarring from the abortion, you can't even get pregnant. So are they telling these young women when they're saying, have as much sex as you want, just use a condom. But if the condom fails, because the ones they give out they don't teach them, they do have activities to teach them how to use them, but they're not giving them enough information. So I'll give you a story. There was a program that UFI did maybe 15 years ago or more. It was called Stay Alive. It was a program used in Africa that I think it was Kenya and Uganda at the time. And it was cost $1 a child. And it taught children how you get AIDS. And it basically...
How to get?
No, how you get AIDS.
Oh, okay.
Like they didn't know. They were told all sorts of stuff like, oh, if you drink this water, you're going to get AIDS. Or, oh, if you know, they were just teaching them it's through sexual contact. So you need to avoid these certain things and do these certain, not engage in these certain behaviors and you will be fine. Because these kids were terrified. Because you remember there was a lot of death in Africa from AIDS and other things. And so the kids a lot of times were orphaned and sent to live with aunts and uncles. For a long time, it was a very, very sad thing going on in Africa with all of this. And so all the NGOs are flocking over there with money and condoms and money and programs and abortion centers and all the other stuff they want, saying, we will fix this problem. Because clearly there's an unmet need, again, that word, for information. We need to educate these poor Africans, which again, the UN is highly racist because why would the Africans need you to tell them how to run their country? They don't. So one of the things UFI believes strongly in is sovereignty, which is one of the reasons why I have a problem with the EU is that there is no sovereignty. None. You have to do everything their way.
Correct.
So there was a country, I'm trying to think which one it was, but it's been so many years. I know I wrote it down somewhere. It was one of the newer, it would have been 2014, probably 2013 or 2014. This country was talking about, this delegate was so excited. She was new. They were going to join the EU and it was going to make everything so much better. And I just wanted to tell her, but it wasn't my place to say, and it wouldn't have made any difference anyway. It wasn't her decision, right? But she was thinking, oh, we're going to have access to all these things. And I just thought, because she believed everything I was saying. She was newly married. She's like, yeah, we totally believe all these things. This family is so important. And she told me they're joining the EU. And I thought, well, you're going to have a really uphill battle because they are not going to let you do those things. And they're going to fight you. And so I don't like any structure that takes the sovereignty away from your nation. Your nation should be able to make decisions based on the culture and traditions and history of your nation. That's what makes you a nation. Right? And that's why the open borders things is happening all over the world. That's UN as well. The UN is actively doing that. They want everybody to be the same.
So my home country, Lithuania, was in the Soviet Union for 50 years, right? So we know exactly what does it mean.
You do.
So we got rid of the Soviet Union in 1991, but after 10 years, we joined another union. Of course, EU is a great place for, you've got one currency, which is comfortable, right? You've got no borders, which is comfortable. You can have, for instance, I have a Lithuanian passport. I can travel the whole European Union. You can live wherever I want. That's amazing. But at the same time, you have this influx of money, lots of money, right? You want to build decent roads, schools, infrastructure. You can have this money, right?
For a price.
But what's the price?
Yes.
No one's talking about the price.
No.
Give me a few examples. What's the price for all that?
The price, well, like I know this happened for sure during COVID. There was a Central American, I don't know if it was Bolivia. I don't want to say the name exactly, but I think it could have been Bolivia. They were told, during COVID, everybody had money, cash shortages because everything was shut down. The trade was all shut down. And so they wanted to, they needed money. They needed a COVID loan. And so people are ready to loan money, but there's always a catch. You need to open abortion clinics in this many of your cities. So what would you do? You're stuck. Your country is falling apart. There's no money for anything. And these people are saying, we will give you cash if there's always... So it's funny that they always accuse President Trump of the quid pro quo with Ukraine. Remember that back in the day? And they do it all the time. When he actually didn't do that, but they're doing it. Like, they're doing it all the time.
They're saying that I'm racist.
Yeah.
You're racist. I'm not racist at all.
And again, why should we be telling anybody, Guatemalans, Bolivians, Nigerians, Ukrainians, why should we be telling anyone
because we've got
how to live their life? That's not our job.
Of course not.
So you've also probably heard of the SDGs or like Agenda 2030. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the UN. So they've been doing this. They started out as the MDGs. You can look this up. The Millennium Development Goals. Well, 2000 came and went, and they didn't reach all their goals. So they had to rename it. Now it's called the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. That's where the ESG comes from. A lot of that comes from that. You need to your company needs to be doing certain things to be approved. That all comes from the same thing. So the SDGs, they started out, I think there used to be like 12. I think there's like 17 or 19 now. There's a lot. They keep adding them. There's different categories: education, environment, and I don't even have them all memorized. We usually look at the ones under education because it involves the family. And these SDGs, literally, every country comes up for review on how they're doing in these goals. Think about how humiliating that is for your sovereignty as a nation to come up amongst a panel of other people from other countries, and they get to grade you on how they think you've done on this particular goal that you made goals on 3 years ago. Okay, we're going to do this. Okay, how are you doing? So they get to give you a report card. The people that don't live in your country, that have nothing to do with your country, don't even care about your country, and they're going to come and tell you, you need to do this and this and this. And you say, okay, I will do it. And you go back and you come back, oh, we didn't do it. We give you a C. We give you, the whole thing is preposterous. Like, why would you agree to something like that? But yet you have to have a UN delegation. You have to have why? Personally, I would love to see the whole thing in New York City gone. Our country pays the most money in UN dues or fees or whatever you want to call them. We give them millions of dollars. I think it's over $60 million every year. Why? What do they do for me? Nothing. There's a bunch of unelected people who are sitting around in a room crafting policy that's going to affect me downstream, like I just said earlier with the CSU in California, and it's going to hurt my family. But I didn't vote for these people. I didn't vote for any of these people. But yet now they're going to, especially like there was a gynecologist in I think it was Nigeria a couple of years ago, and she said, can you just basically leave us alone?
Mm-hmm.
Can you stop throwing condoms at us? Let us do our job. But they always make it sound as, oh, those poor Africans. So when you mentioned Africa at the very beginning, I thought, oh gosh, I feel terrible. These are not stupid people
At all.
and they make it sound like they can't do anything without our help. And so there's all this money that comes, but luckily, like I said, that the countries are starting to stand up now. There was a recent southern one I was going to share with you. They had an abortion fight again. Abortion is in there again. There was a document on the family. So this is November 21st was this article was written. And, it said Burundi, which is in Africa, and other delegations from Africa ensured the removal of the term reproductive health in the final draft of a resolution on the family. So it's a document on the family, and all the Western countries are trying to shame them into saying, they call them traditional countries, and we're Western. I'll side with the traditional anytime. Yeah. But anyway, you see how they divide them? Well, you're traditional and you're getting in our way. Well, guess what they're finding out? You only need, like I said, because only one country to stand up. One. To stand up and say, no, I don't agree with this. This needs to come out. And that the resolution can't go forward. But guess what they do a lot of other times? We've been at CSWs sometimes so CSW is about 2 weeks long. It's always in March.
Once a year.
Yes, at the end of the second week, and there's other conferences. This is just the one that we go to the most. At the end of that second week, that's when they start the actual negotiations on this document that they're working on. So everyone puts all their suggestions in. They come up with this big draft, and then all the companies go through and they redline certain things. I want this. I don't want this. I want this. I don't want this. And then they start bargaining, right? So they get to that last couple days, and once they enter that last session of the General Assembly, you are not allowed to leave the room until they have consensus, till it's over. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking you leaving to use the restroom, leaving to get a drink of water.
So eventually they're going to give up.
You leave, you can't come back in, therefore you can't vote. So see what they're going to, what that was you. They've had these conferences last till 5 a.m. Saturday morning.
Really?
And the people are dying. They haven't slept. And again, like you said, they break them down. Well, if we keep them in here long enough, then they're going to say, fine, it's like a game of uncle, Twist your arm behind your back long enough until the kid cries uncle. Well, they're going to say, okay, I'm exhausted. I can't do it anymore. Okay, fine, whatever you want. And they've done this for a very long time. The good news is these countries are wising up to it over the last few years we've seen. So we lost Africa for a while as far as they got, bought into all this money. And then we kind of had South America and Central America. Those are just very traditional countries. The people are very traditional, very family-centered.
Christians.
Yes, a lot of very, very, very Christian-centric. And so they don't believe in all of this modernization that they're trying to push, the progressivism. But now we've kind of lost Mexico, most the Central American and even South American countries are very liberal, very progressive, so now they're in that phase of there's a lot of money to be had if you follow the right way of thinking, right? It takes a lot of guts, backbone, whatever you want to call it, to stand up and say no to the money. We'll figure it out on our own. But people are starting to do it. So the sections of the world that are the easiest to work with at this point are typically the African nations, the Middle Eastern nations, and some, because even the South Pacific, we think are pretty traditional. Samoa, Tonga, Indonesia, Vanuatu, they're very traditional. But they're kind of become silent in the last little bit too, which, we're trying to push for we need these small countries to, like I said, it just takes one to stand up and say, this is not good for our country. This is not good for our families. And the whole thing that UFI does too is we talk about family capital as far as money. So countries all the time, and this country specifically, spends an unknowable amount of money trying to fix societal problems, right? And we try to teach delegates all the time, if your government would focus on healthy family formation and on supporting families to create their family and to build their family, if you created incentives for that, you wouldn't need all these programs. And if that money could the family becomes your investment capital. Because if you have intact families, your country grows, right? Your society, you have less crime. You have less mental illness and a lot of things that happen. Now, people will say, I've had people from EU countries tell me this, well, there's plenty of families I know that have all sorts of problems. And so how can you say the family? I said, that is true. But again, if the governments would take more time and invest in the family as the way God intends it to be, and they don't like that either because they think it's, you're being judgmental. But it's just true, okay? If that's what's healthiest for children. So UFI is not a religious organization. It's actually a social science-based organization. We look at research and studies on social science issues, and we share those with people. So you can go to the website. There's all sorts of tons of information on there on the harms of all these things that they're saying are good for you. We can show you the science. We're not going to say, believe us, it's the science. We're going to say it's right here. Here's the study that shows you that the best place for a child to be raised is with a mother and a father, period. Bar none. Families, couples that live together before they get married have a much higher rate of divorce. That's a fact.
Really?
There are social studies showing that. There are research studies showing that.
If they live together prior to marriage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I'm not really, I don't know if it's just that, people move in together very quickly nowadays. They'll be dating for a month and say, let's move in together, I know people that have lived together for a long time and never get married. And I think, what is it that we are doing wrong as a society that we don't value family, motherhood, fatherhood, being married, And again, you go back to the way they're teaching you to think. They're teaching children to think that sex is an activity. And therefore, you need to make sure you have as much fun with that activity as you can. They don't talk about sex in the context of life and responsibility and commitment. They don't talk about any of those things. Sex is an activity to be enjoyed. So again, it's all about you. So the UN is very I-centric, and UFI is very family-centric or we-centric. Mm-hmm. We as a family take care of each other. If something happened to your wife, you'd be there in a second, right? If something happened to one of my children, my husband, my grandchildren, I would be there. I would be there. I would be there to help in wherever I could. If a kid doesn't have that, who does he go to?
But it's almost the same thing with my friends and neighbors, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something happens with my neighbor,
yes.
I'm like, right here, 2 minutes in.
Right. But they've discouraged that as well. Look what they did during COVID.
Oh,
stay home.
Snitching.
Stay home. Don't, if your neighbor's out doing something, you need to let us know. That happened all the time, and if you're somewhere without a mask, I went into a store. I think it was probably late 2020, early 2021. I wasn't near anyone. Okay. And then they said now the social distancing is a nonsense. But anyway, I was near no one. And I was just minding my own business, looking at something in the store. Sure enough, after about 20 minutes, I get a store associate come up saying, "We need you to put your mask on." And I said, "I actually can't wear one." And he said, "Well, then you need to leave."
Segregation.
That's all these women standing in line.
How does it differ from having this
It's the same.
yellow star?
Yeah.
You
it's
don't
the
have
same.
a yellow star?
No.
You can do it.
Well, it's the same. It's the same with families. So if I try to tell someone, and I know people that would say this, that the best place for a child to be created, trained, loved, reared is in a traditional family, mother and father. And they would call me a bigot. I know people that would. But this is the interesting thing. Something that we found out too is that people that believe this stuff don't really believe it. They don't. They do it, like I said, for money and power.
They're prostitutes.
So they are. So there was another thing that I just read. I couldn't believe that somebody found this out. Luckily, that somebody had a microphone on. Where is that one?
But it's so cheap just to be a sellout for money.
Yeah. So this one was in September. It says abortion advocates have finally publicly admitted their ongoing plot to impose abortion and sexual rights on the world. During a discussion linked to the upcoming UN Summit for the Future, notice the title, pro-abortion delegates and journalists admitted that they have inserted coded language such as sexual and reproductive health, which is the SRHR we talked about, in every area of UN policy as a pretext to get more funding, money, and leverage, power to promote abortion. It is important to add sexual and reproductive health language beyond the confines of the normal Third Committee in the General Assembly. The purpose ranged from human rights to gender to climate, energy. It was always to generate more funding, programs, positions from which to promote abortion access and sexual rights, and eventually their recognition. Do you see what they're trying to do? They're admitting it here. We put these words in here, they make them vague on purpose, and the purpose is what? To get funding and leverage. And then they also say it's for, they want recognition. They want everyone to recognize that abortion is amazing and we should keep having it. Well, who makes money off abortion?
The clinics.
The clinics, and then the psychiatrists for those women. And the doctors that have to fix the problems that went wrong during the abortion. So it's all money. Same with the gender. If you get a kid hooked on that, they don't care that you're getting, their issue is not to get you away from their families, to make money off of you. They will make money off the hormones. They will make money off the chest binders and the surgeries, the lifetime hormone supplements, and then the psychiatrist to help them because this thing's messed them up.
And the opioids?
Yep. And so they admitted it right here. Exactly what I said. It's money and power. And that's why they're doing it.
But how much is enough?
It's never enough because they're... All I can say is, because I've had people ask me this before, why are they so, I didn't think people were this bad or this evil or whatever word you want to use. I said, I would hope that they aren't either. But clearly there are enough people that really, really, really embrace communism. Because this is communism. To say you have to think this way, you must do things this way. And the world government, the globalist centralized power is God. So it's the other thing. They don't like religion. Remember I mentioned faith and family were the two things that kept a kid from these? They don't like religion. Religion, if you bring up any what I just said, they'll say, "Oh, you're a religious zealot."
Christian nationalist.
No, yeah, you're someone who hates gay people. No. If we had a gay president, I wouldn't care. I really wouldn't care. As long as that president is going to put America's interests first.
Yes.
If that person, I don't care if it's a woman. I don't care if it's a purple Martian. Okay. If that person's going to make America prosper and is going to protect families and help children grow up healthy and strong and help marriages thrive, I will vote for that person. So they always paint the religious people as you hate gay people. No. Do you know who's the most at risk of all these programs with these kids? Are the kids who are from single-parent households, the kids that are from abusive households, the kids that are struggling with, I'm not as good, I don't feel like I fit in with a lot of the boys. Maybe I'm gay. And so instead of saying, well, why don't we just talk about how you're feeling and let's let everybody, love each other, and instead of pitting us against each other, they have to say, well, maybe you're a girl. I mean, you like girl things, right? You're a girl, right? Next thing you know, the kid says, oh, someone likes me. And so they're going this way. And then that kid has no idea. So the people that are doing this to these children, they don't care about those kids. It's just like the migrant children coming over, they don't care about those kids. They want to use those children to achieve their ends, which is, this is what they want. They want the population of the world to be a tiny fraction of what it is right now.
Why?
Because
there's plenty of space, even here in the
because
US.
They're selfish. Why do you think they don't believe in God? They don't believe in helping your fellow man. They're all about themselves. Remember what I said? The UN is me.
But who's going to work for them? Who's going to pay the taxes?
They don't think about that.
Because they've got trillions.
Exactly. So you look at places like South Korea, who I think I just read the other day has like a 0.7 children per woman now.
Yes.
It's not even one.
Yes.
They're not getting married.
It's a disaster.
They're not having children. And they're seeing it as, now the UN is that behind that too, because their whole thing is women are productive when they're working. They will tell you that. Their goal, they call someone who's home caring for someone, whether it's an aging parent or a child, as unpaid labor. They actually call it that. Now, I was home with our children I had the blessing of being able to do that. I worked for the first 10 years we were married. When we had our fourth child, I was finally able to not work. And it was the hugest blessing in my life because I could focus on these 4 little people that God had given me to train and to raise to be good, honest, productive adults. That was my job. But they don't want, and all the time I would hear people say, how many kids do you have? Don't you guys know how to stop? I mean, really rude, offensive things. Motherhood has always been looked down on as like, no one really chooses that. What's your career? So I would say I work for free. I started turning it around on them. I said, I work for free. Oh, really? What do you do? I said, yeah, I raise human beings. I work for free. It's wonderful. Before they could say anything like, oh, I don't know, that's a lot. I'm like, no, it's great. It's wonderful. It's the best thing I've ever done. And then they would also assume I wasn't educated. All the time. I mean, these people are truly racist. Okay, they're yes. Misogynist. They're all the terms they throw at you. That's who they are. Because honestly, so I started just telling people, like, I come up to the grocery store and see me with my children in the grocery cart, and I'm busy, and they'd say, "Oh, you sure have your hands full." And instead of getting annoyed, which I did at first, I would turn around with a big smile and I say, "Isn't it great?" Nothing to say. So again, we have to fight this by getting motherhood, fatherhood to be sacred roles again. Mm-hmm. These need to be roles that are the most esteemed roles of any in our country. To be a mother who has a child and takes that child on as her personal responsibility and loves it and is not looking for an escape all the time and wants to go work so she can drop. Women have to work. I'm not saying if you're working, you're doing this. I'm saying that the idea that you should work and that's more important than this, that's what I'm talking about. I worked when I had kids too. You have to do it. A lot of people do. It's expensive. I wished I didn't, but I did have to do it for a while. And I was really glad when we were blessed that I didn't have to do that anymore. And it was a wonderful, wonderful blessing. But for the most part, I mean, if you go to a party and all the adults are talking, so what do you do for a living? That's everybody's question, right? And what does the mother say?
I'm a house.
And she gets passed over because everyone wants to hear about the husband's career. Or if it's the wife working and the husband is a stay-at-home dad, which does happen, they don't want to hear about what he does. That's not interesting. We have to change the conversation and make parenthood something that is admired and something that is, but again, governments could do more, a lot more to promote that. I'm not just talking about birth rate because that's a big topic right now on social media. That is a big topic. But these people can be countered by healthy family formation, teaching your children that the best thing in life they can do is to get married and have a family. That is the most important thing. When people get to the end of their life, they're not going to say, I'm so glad I stood up for abortion all those years. I mean, really.
I killed 3 babies.
Yeah, what are you going to think about? You're going to be saying, okay, I'm surrounded by my family. I'm surrounded by and People can say other things, well, I have a family I've made of my own, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, okay, for certain situations. But for the raising and nurturing of children, you need a family. And that's what UFI preaches at the UN.
And that's the best thing for the country, for the
it's the foundation. It's the foundation of every society.
So I've seen this. There has been a research, the study has been done. So you have a boy has 20 times more chances of getting into jail or prison if he was fatherless. 20 times, not 2 times or just too much.
I believe it.
20 times.
Because, like you said, the father is more likely to be the disciplinarian, right? The mother's going to take, typically, not all the time, but mothers typically are more attuned to the emotional goings on of their children. Fathers are the rules being followed. That's what dads do. They're programmed that way. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's how you balance it.
Yeah, that's how you balance.
Mom
because
like this,
if you had all the
like
rules
that.
with no emotion, or all emotion, no rules, I mean, this is why they're trying to also legalize sex work, because they want to a woman that's doing that. Well, at least she's working. She's being productive. But also they know it makes her not. She's probably not going to have a family in most cases, because women that are in that line of work typically are not in the, don't have families. Sometimes they do, but not typically. And so all of these things are meant to pull women out of their natural role, as their natural role is seen as dirty or wrong or uneducated or whatever the word they're going to use.
But doing the OnlyFans account, that's way out, right?
Because you get attention and likes, and everybody thinks you're
and millions
amazing.
of dollars. Mm-hmm. They've got lots of money.
Yeah. But no one wants to hear, tell me about your kids. How do you love being what's it like being a mom? I've had no one ask me that. I've had no one ask me that the entire time that very rare, very rare. What's it like being a mom? What do you love about it? Like, that's a job. That's a legitimate job.
24/7.
And it's a lot harder than any other job you get paid for. A lot harder. And yet no one wants to know about it.
Talk to me about the UN, and let's take, for instance, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, UAE. Do those countries try to implement the same thing from the UN?
No.
How do they stand up?
They vote as a bloc as well, and they usually stand up and say, no, that's not okay with us. Russia does very frequently as well.
And the UN is okay with that?
Well, why do you think why do you think a lot of the geopolitical stuff that goes on is targeting those countries? I'm not privy to these conversations, but I can see the connections.
Really?
Well, these countries are traditional.
Very.
So Africa, they keep under poverty by experimenting on them with all sorts of medical interventions and giving them abortion and all this other stuff. And it's
documented.
As far as Africa, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's documented that Bill Gates has gone over there and tested vaccines on these children.
So in regards to Africa, so Africa had AIDS problem?
For a while it did, yeah. Pretty big.
Why?
One. Because they didn't
they weren't junkies.
No.
So they were getting AIDS by having lots of sex, unprotected sex?
Somehow it showed up, right? How did it start? I don't know. I don't know. But that's not, I mean, and so now they basically say, well, these countries need our help, because clearly they have child pregnancy way too often. And so the answer to that is abortion, condoms, and sexuality education in their schools. That'll prevent all of this from happening. Well, it doesn't.
So in tribes, they used to...
They have a tribal leader, yeah.
They used to have kids at a very young age.
Yep.
So this is not the problem. This is their culture.
Yeah. But now it's like, well, you can't come back to school if you're pregnant. Now, what I have heard sometimes is happening over there is that girls will get propositioned sometimes by their teachers or by other people. And there's a lot of, it's a poor country, so money exchanges hands. If you'll marry my daughter, if you'll, whatever. Well, I will give your family extra food if you'll have sex with me. And so there's a lot of that goes on too. So who those people are, what's behind all of that and how prevalent it is, I don't know. But I do know that Africa has been mistreated for a very long time. And there's some amazing people. There's amazing people everywhere. But, they are not poor, uneducated.
Like we're being told.
No. No.
So they keep Africa poor. They don't like Russia because of their traditions. They don't like the Middle East because of their other traditions. The culture is very different.
Yep.
What about China? It's a huge country.
China, we don't ever talk to any of the Asian countries, honestly. Vietnam, Laos, a little bit Laos.
Malaysia. Huge country with huge
Yeah,
population.
I mean, India, like I said, has kind of gotten more liberal over the years. So I'm not really sure, but like, Japan, they're not, policy-wise, they're not family-centric. They're just not.
Not.
No.
So China is not family-centric
No.
and kid-centric because they had these quotas? You have one child per family?
I think it's more along the lines for China, at least, that they, and a lot of the Asian countries are very government-centric. Have you noticed that? Israel's the same way. A lot of countries are like that, not just Asian countries, but a lot of countries that are Asian are very government-centric. They're very government knows best. And I just don't, it's easy for them to go along with what their government says in a lot of cases. I'm not saying that they're drones or robots or anything, okay? I don't know any of them personally. I'm just saying the way that the attitudes seem to be that way.
Why, for instance, Saudi Arabia or UAE are in the UN? They don't need any money. No. They got plenty of them.
I don't know. Somebody made the decision to get in, and I don't know how you get out.
It's like communism. You
yeah,
can vote out.
Exactly. So it's very easy to fall into it. Now, I'm not sure how you get out. I know people have been saying for a while they want the U.S. to get out because the UN, honestly, at this point is just, it's a large group of people who are not invested in you or your nation, trying to tell you and your nation how to live. That's what they do. And
people that are not being elected.
Mm-hmm. And the UN, I tell people this all the time. I said, the UN is all about sex. Seriously. That's all. They have to bring it into everything.
When did it all start?
It started not long after it was put together, honestly.
Right away, almost.
Yeah. And so they had, you can look up histories of how the UN began and how it changed, but it changed very quickly, like in the 50s.
But the acceleration, I want to say, started like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. It went through the roof.
Yeah. What? Well, I think because they started seeing like, we have, well, I mean, just like you see like what happened with, the ESG and DEI stuff, that had a big splash, and all of a sudden now you notice people are retreating from it. So everything kind of, I think they gobbled too quickly and they expanded too quickly. People started saying, I don't really like this. And they started turning away. And so I think they tried to, kind of like any franchise, they tried to expand too quickly. Mm-hmm. And when people started to see what they were really all about, they rejected it. And so they're trying to hold on to power at this point, but realizing that, honestly, if the U.S. dried up its funding for every UN agency, they would have to give us their program of what they're going to do. We would have to have oversight to watch them do it, because there's plenty of stories of UN peacekeepers doing horrific things. There's plenty of stories of UN agencies going in and partnering with NGOs and funding horrific things.
Share some stories.
We're paying this. So I do know, okay, I'm going to share this one that I did. This was with the Philippines. So it's UNFPA, again, the Population Fund, and Bayer Philippines sealed an agreement to jointly lead a series of activities empowering young people to champion sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR, and address harmful gender norms. The goal is to reduce teenage pregnancy in the country. So that's their goal, which sounds great, right? So the project is titled Adolescent Peer Champions for SRHR. Will train young people ages 15 to 19 to become community and social media influencers that will help promote peer-to-peer conversations about family planning and SRHR among youth. The Philippines has the highest unmet need for family planning among adolescents. So they always say that. They have an unmet need. So there's a need for contraception that's not being met. That's their foot in the door. To say, you need condoms, you need abortion clinics.
But you don't know that you need that.
No, they're just saying, well, look, there's teenage pregnancy, so clearly they need these things, and we can provide them for a cost, for a fee, right? So it says, this means that although these young people who are engaged in sexual activities report that they do not want to have more children or at least delay having their next child, they don't actually use any method of contraception. Well, who is this person saying this? She's the UNFPA representative in the Philippines. Is she being honest? How much of a problem is it? And again, if there's more investment in the family and teaching parents to teach their children correct principles, would we be having this conversation? Would Bayer Philippines be needing to come in here with UNFPA and make this agreement saying we're going to teach teenagers how to go talk to their friends about how to get abortions and how to get condoms? You see what they're doing? They're sidestepping the family altogether and saying we're going to have to do it with their peers.
Because they know better.
When you were a teenager, how much did you know? Teenagers teaching teenagers. I don't think that sounds really great. So she says, we're enabling community champions to initiate informed peer-to-peer conversations and to even challenge harmful gender norms in the process. See how it started?
Gender norms.
It started with, we're going to help them not get pregnant as teenagers. And look how it ends. They're going to challenge harmful. So what is the real purpose of the program? It's not what it says. It's any title of any program is never what it says. It never is. It says it's going to also engage potential adult key opinion leaders in the community to help overcome barriers related to parental consent in the context of adolescent SRHR and family planning. So again, they're going to get rid of the barrier of parents, right? The parental consent is a barrier. They consider that. You shouldn't be able to need permission from your parents to do something. To take a life-altering drug or to cut off a body part or to have a surgery that you don't know what it's going to do for your... No, parents have to get out of the way. This is what they always do. And so it just, honestly, at this point, it makes me sick. So I sent this to the Philippines delegate, and she said, well, abortion is not legal in the Philippines. I am not aware of this project. I'll look into it. So a lot of times they're not aware.
It's not legal.
She said, no, that's not... No.
Yet.
But they're using it again. Think what they're doing. They're not saying the word abortion. They said nowhere they said abortion, that whole thing I read. It's sexual and reproductive health and rights. So they use health and rights, which they know are two words. They're going to make everybody go, oh, perk up. Health? You want to help somebody healthier? Okay, great. You want to help them keep their rights? Sounds good.
Well, I don't see any problems with condoms. I see problem with the teenagers having sex, obviously, but I don't see any problems with condoms. But with birth control pills and the abortions,
well,
this is way different.
Yes, but even the thing about condoms. So I have a friend who used to teach through a Planned Parenthood affiliate. She used to teach the lessons on sex CSE in, I think, Texas, and she, left after a while, seeing kind of what was really happening. And she said, it's not condom use that they're teaching. They're teaching consent. So they're teaching children as young as, I have pictures of girls as young as 9 years old in some African nations with a model of a penis, and they're practicing putting a condom on it.
9-year-olds.
9-year-olds. Okay. So there are several things going on here when you're teaching them to use condoms. You have to teach them how to use the condom. How do you do that? You have to demonstrate something. You're doing this in mixed company. You have girls and boys in the same room. It's very awkward and uncomfortable. And you're having an adult who's not you talk to your kid about how to use a condom. Now are you still comfortable with them teaching them how to use condoms? Do you want some random adult having a sexual conversation with your child about sexual topics and showing them pictures and demonstrations on how to do something that's for a sexual act? So it's not just a matter of handing them a condom. Someone has to teach them how to use the condom, and that involves all these other things. So now you're talking about an adult who, in a lot of cases, you don't know, coming in and teaching your child how to engage in a sexual act and how to provide consent. Because if you're going to put a condom on, there's consent involved somewhere. That's what they're hoping, right? So what this friend of mine says, she says, it's all about actually negotiating consent. It's not about condom use at all. It's teaching children who are children. Children should not be having sex, okay? It's teaching children that as long as you negotiate consent, everything's okay. Do we want our kids negotiating sexual consent? No. And people say, well, what if they get assaulted?
If you're going to get assaulted, you're not going to
have
some
consent.
time to get
there's no consent if you're being assaulted. So I mean, the guy's not going to keep coming if you said no, he's going to keep coming if he plans on assaulting you. There's nothing, or a woman assaulting a man. Nothing's going to change that. So just being able to say, I don't consent doesn't mean anything. So the whole thing about condom use really is a negotiation with consent. And like I said, it involves someone teaching your child how to manage a highly complex, emotional, hormonal, sexual situation that you're not present there to hear any of what is said.
What's the most horrific thing that you've heard or saw at the UN meetings?
There was, I'm not in a lot of the meetings because those are just for the delegations. We talk to the delegates outside of the fact. But some disturbing things I've heard. I mean, I was speaking with a delegate one time. I think she was from Suriname, which I had to look it up because I didn't know where Suriname is. It's on the northern part of South Africa. They speak French. And she was saying, you know, I don't think I'm going to keep this job. And I said, and she was great to work with. She was, you know, we could give her things. She was very helpful. Really, really wanted to protect the family. And I thought, no, you can't leave. You're doing such a good job. And she said, I'm just so tired. She said, I was joking with a colleague the other day that, you know, they're always just talking about sex and everything is so much pressure and you got to put this stuff in here and I don't want to do it. But she goes, I get my computer and I've got like, I don't know, dozens of emails all asking me, how are you going to vote? 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 And there was even, she just, I just don't want to do it anymore. And I said, I couldn't argue with her. So I haven't myself been privy to these conversations they're having in the General Assembly because that's just delegations. Like we can't go in there. I don't have clearance for that. But you hear things outside of that. And there was another time where, so each time they do these conferences, they'll have a different countries be in charge of that process, of that document. So and it rotates. So there's never ever one country that's in charge of everything. This time, I think it was Kenya. It was like, again, before COVID, so it was 2018, 2019. And in the General Assembly at the end, she actually said that she had been harassed by people walking in the hallways, trying to get to her meetings, harassed by people trying to influence how she was going to run the negotiations. So the UN is very, very political, very complex, very, I've been in, we were in one of the cafe areas one year and our group was kind of caucusing in between different things. And we started to talk and one of the people who'd been there longer said, you got to lower your voice. I said, okay. He says, everybody around here is listening and you don't want to give away what we're talking about. So now you're in this like, it's a little crazy, you know, but I mean, it just.
So the UN is top of the top. Mm-hmm. WHO, WEF, it's under the UN.
WEF is its own thing, but I do believe it's an outgrowth of the UN. I don't think it's not official that I know of, but the WHO is UN.
There's nothing higher than the UN. It's global.
Technically, no, yeah. But I mean, the WEF is kind of set up as, I see the WEF, the EU, and the UN is all the same. Because they all have the same goals. Destruction of the family, promotion of individual rights over anything else, and sexual freedom. That's all they care about.
Individual rights?
Mm-hmm. Remember I said it's me.
Oh.
The UN's all about me. So as long as you're happy, as long as
you're... Yeah, but we as a country, we know better than you.
Yeah, and we get to tell...
The government.
Yeah, and so all their rules are going to be leading you that way. And so they've gotten... All this thinking has infected our own public education system. Not just with the sexual ed, but with the other things I was talking about. They have something called social emotional learning in the schools, or mindfulness sometimes it's called. SEL is basically CSE under a different name because it's teaching you... CSE teaches you what they want you to do with your body. SEL teaches you what you want to do with your mind. So you have the body and the mind of a child. You got the child.
SEL is where they get those quizzes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell please the audience what's SEL.
SEL, social emotional learning, and they'll call it different things because parents started finding out about SEL, started asking, are we doing SEL? And so they start renaming it, right? So basically, anytime you're having any kind of social groupthink type of exercise where they're saying, like sometimes it's very overt. Like we've had some schools where the kids are, doing meditations and having, Buddhist monks chanting. I mean, that's very severe. I haven't seen very much of that, but I'm like, okay, I thought we didn't have religion in the schools.
Yes.
So, but they're doing things like this. And so I think, a lot of the SEL stuff really comes down to, okay, like let's say at home, you're teaching your child that you think it's really important to pray every morning.
Yes.
Before you leave the house.
Yes.
Okay, we taught our children that. We're allowed to teach our children that. It's our house. I didn't tell anybody else they had to do it, but we did it in our home. And so let's say they go to school and they find out that, well, prayer is, praying to God is really, it's very bigoted, whatever word they're going to use. Okay. It's very judgmental. It's very racist or bad or whatever word they're going to pick for the day. And this is why. Because the person next to you doesn't have a mother that teaches him that. His father isn't around, or his mother's on drugs, or it could be something positive. Well, this kid is a Buddhist. He doesn't pray to God. So you can't say that in front of this kid because now this kid's going to feel bad. So everything's about making someone feel bad. So anytime, like there's questionnaires that come out, like California has the California Kids Healthy Survey, whatever that comes out every year. I always tell parents, please do not fill out any surveys from school.
Why?
If you're in public school. They use the data from you ever seen things where they say like, so studies show that always comes from stuff like, well, we found out that our kids in our school, there's this unmet need for counseling because kids are reporting that they're sad. You know where they get that from is some ill-formed question that says something like, when you get to school most days, yesterday, how are you feeling? And they could have slept poorly and they just weren't feeling it that day. So they write down, I felt poorly today.
Sadness.
Say the kids are sad. They need counseling. See, the kids are sad. So they take the answers and they twist them and use them for how they want them to be used. So then that's what they come out with saying, studies show. Well, who studies? Who did the studies? Was someone watching that was done correctly? I don't know. And not only that, but the teachers, I had a parent tell me that her daughter in kindergarten or first grade, very young, I think it was kindergarten. She brought a survey home and the mom says, we don't do surveys. So she threw it away. A week or so later, the teacher calls her and says, hey, I don't have your survey. And she says, well, yeah, I wasn't going to do it. And she says, well, you see, your daughter's the only one who hasn't turned it in. And for us to get a pizza party, we need 100%. Do you think you could do it?
That's a manipulation.
Yeah. Kid's 5 years old. Is the teacher going to tell the other kids? This is a kid that we don't have a pizza. I mean, who knows? I don't know. But I'm just saying,
5-year-olds?
Yeah. 5 years old. So there's incentives.
What do they know when they're 5? My son is 5.
I'm sure it was like 3 questions it wasn't much. But they're asking the parent to fill it out, not the kid, because they're 5, So the parent's supposed to fill it out. But again, who wrote the survey? Who's funding the survey? What's the intended purpose of it? They don't tell you any of those things. You think you're doing some kind of random research thing that they need. So I always tell parents, just don't do any surveys. None.
And how manipulative are the questions?
It depends on who's writing them.
Yeah. I can twist it.
Yeah, because they'll write things like, sometimes it's very overt, like, how many times have you had sex?
Yeah.
As teenagers,
Or did you have sex on Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yeah.
No other option.
Did you ever have sex when you were angry? Or that's really just ridiculous questions, It's just, and the kids feel like, well, everybody else is doing it, so I got to do it. Like when my youngest son was in high school, I finally found out, and I wish I'd known this before, that you can actually ask for a different reading assignment. So when they would give these kids these horrifically graphic, sexually explicit books to read, Heart of Darkness, and I forgot some of the other ones they would.
Flame, or how is it called?
Which one?
Flame. Yeah, it's Flame, with the fire on the cover.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. I know Heart of Darkness is particularly disturbing, and but the teachers will push it all. This is really good literature.
Heart of Darkness.
Yeah,
great name.
Heart of Darkness, and my kids told me about it. I just thought, well, that's really. I'm really sorry, honey. Just try to get through and get the test. Well, by the time I got to the youngest one, I finally found out through my advocacy work that you don't have to read those books.
Really?
You can just say, you know what? I don't want to read this book. It goes against my religion, my personal beliefs, and so I don't want to read it. I need a different assignment. So my youngest son, we did that. Guess what they would give him? No joke. They gave him the most boring, technical reading ever and made him read this over here and then write your report on it. So you're going to read
punish.
a novel, or you're going to read something that's really hard to understand and super boring. And in some cases, I have heard parents, this has happened to my son, but other parents where the child was sent to the library alone, so separated from the group, the yellow star again, to sit in the library and work on the assignment because you're not going to group think with us. You're not going to do the approved activity. So see, this way of thinking, it inserts itself in all sorts of ways. And so parents have to be really careful about a lot of things. And all of this stuff, this way of thinking comes from this centralized approach that starts at the UN. Now, I don't know where it began before that, but that's where it's really rotted right now, is there. And so when you say it doesn't affect your life, absolutely affects your life.
Let's say I'm a UN delegate, right? And I come in to the meeting like that. Will I be harassed?
Probably.
What if it's not the cross, but the Buddha sign or something else?
They won't say it to your face, but, you know, it is one of the more anti-God organizations I've ever seen.
Anti-God or anti-Jesus?
It doesn't matter.
Really?
Anti-religion.
All of them?
Yes.
Buddhism.
Because your God is more important than their government.
Of course!
So like I said, they don't want faith or family. Those are the two barriers that they are constantly trying to knock down. And so any leader anywhere, this country, doesn't matter where they are, if they are trying to fight those two things, they are not your friend if you are someone who is pro-family.
Okay, so UN, huge organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Controls the whole world.
Yeah.
Vatican, at the same time, controls at minimum 1 billion people, right? Do they have anything in common? How do they work together?
Not really. The Vatican has representation there, but they can't vote. So they send a representative. They have a delegate.
But they can't vote.
They don't vote because they're not a recognized country. They're just a little compound there with the Vatican. So they do meet with delegations. They're kind of their own unofficial NGO as far as they're able to make statements on the floor, but they can't vote.
Do they oppose each other?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're trying to split the power between.
I mean, the Vatican is not super powerful from what I understand there.
At the UN?
Yeah.
What about in the whole world? Is it powerful? Just like the UN is?
No, I wouldn't say they're on the same footing. No.
Who would you say is the main adversary of the UN?
I don't really think there's an organization that is, because no one's this is the problem that always happens, and you'll understand this. Anytime, as I put it, the dark side, because all they're about is darkness. Okay, all they care about is ruining everything. They ruin families, they ruin lives, they don't care. They ruin countries. So the dark
free sex without consequences is great if I'm 14 years old.
Right. Yeah. And again, when you mentioned condom use, I thought of this just now as you said that. What 14-year-old, if he's told to enjoy his sexual freedom, is going to take the time or the responsibility to not only remember to use a condom, to put it on correctly when he's in the heat of the moment? You tell me, find a 14-year-old boy that's going to do that, I'll pay you money. It's not going to happen.
Like faster.
No, he's not going to remember anything you taught him. So all those lessons you did are going out the window, because they've even found adults don't use contraception, and they expect kids to. And
because they have Plan B.
Yeah, exactly.
And Plan C with
there's plenty of options to get rid of the products of what you decide to engage in. So anyway, what was your question? I forgot.
Adversaries of the UN.
The biggest way that I found I mean, there are NGOs like us that are out there, but I mean, there's no one that I know of that's like, oh, you know. But what I was saying is that people who are on the other side, who are pushing for these things, their whole goal is to get it done. They don't care who they step on. They don't care who they destroy. They don't care who is pushed out. Their goal is supreme. Our side, and this has happened multiple times just in this state, in the time I've been involved in advocacy work, it's only been 6 years in this state. I was doing the UN before that. We fight amongst ourselves all the time. And so I can't, there's been a couple of times where someone has approached me to combine advocacy groups in this state. Both times, at least 2, maybe 3 actually. Yeah, I think it's 3. And they always want something. They want to dissolve your autonomy, and now it's under this person. That person and then the next thing you know, like, well, who are you partnering with? Who's? I want data collection. I want email addresses. I want whatever it is. We don't work well together. And so our efforts don't ever have the ability to get as powerful as something like the UN because there's too much infighting. Think about just with this election with President Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We had so many people saying, especially the evangelical Christians, he doesn't support an abortion ban. I can't vote for him.
So they will never cast
So you're going to throw out the
votes.
baby with the bathwater, because that's an expression here that, you're going to throw out the good with the dirty bathwater because you don't like the dirty bathwater. Well, don't you want to save the baby? Like, President Trump champions so many things that will help Christians in particular and families thrive, but you're going to not vote for him because he won't ban abortion, which is not his right to do. So, but you had people who would not vote for him because he wouldn't do that. So this is why we don't win, is because, I'm not saying compromise. I'm just saying that you have to understand the goal of what we're trying to accomplish here. The other side, the left, the dark side, whatever you want to call them, they understand it very well.
They want us to fight each other.
Yes, and so they make it. We find this one issue that we just can't swallow, and therefore I just can't do it. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to stay home. I mean,
but do you find it that this rivalry, right? This battle is you can meet those rivalries in many aspects of our world.
Sure.
My favorite team against your favorite team. Democrats, Republicans.
Black versus white.
Black, white. Pro-abortion, pro-choice. We hate each other.
Yeah.
We have to hate each other. While at the same time, our true enemy is just laughing and he's...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well, that's why I said they don't care who they step on. Think about what happened with the Democrat nomination this year. Okay. These same principles are at work. They had a man who clearly was suffering from dementia, okay, of some sort. He wasn't in his right faculties, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doctor, but clearly he was not well. They all covered it up forever. And then they put this woman in here that no one voted for and say it's okay because the delegates said yes, they would vote for her. The people didn't vote for her. So you see what they did right there? They stepped all over their processes and procedures and rules because this is their objective. They have to get someone in there to keep their abortion going. They have to get someone in there to keep the gender clinics open. They got to get someone in there that they can control. So the rules go out the window. They don't care about the rules. We care about the rules on this side. And a lot of times what happens, and I've seen this happen many times, where groups have fallen apart, in my experience, short experience of 6 years in this state, of we don't play well together. And so that's why, honestly, I think there's not a group that rivals the power of the UN. All we can do, and I'm not sure I want there to be, and this is why. When you have centralized power, you have centralized rot, centralized corruption. I don't think that our movement would tolerate that. I don't. I think that we would not feel well enough to keep working in that scenario. Whereas the other side, again, they don't care. The goal is all that matters. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter how you feel. Again, it's the groupthink of the UN, right? The groupthink of the SCL. There's one way to do things. If you do it this way, everything will turn out the way we say it should turn out. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. It doesn't matter if you think it's okay. As long as you follow it, you will be approved. And so it's the same this way. They have one goal. Their goal is whatever they're trying to accomplish, and they don't care who dies or gets hurt in the process. Our side, we care about the rules. We care about making sure that things are done the right way, that we have a result that is workable, that makes sense, that we can keep in place for a long period of time, right? The other side doesn't care about that. And so I don't think I want there to be another UN, a good UN. I have always been really big, and the more I talk to delegates, the more strongly I feel this way. They have every right in the world to control the decisions of their own country. No one should be telling Uganda how to govern Ugandans. No one should be telling Ukraine how to govern Ukrainians. We shouldn't even be over there. We shouldn't be over there. That is not our job. We shouldn't have meddled in the Middle East. I mean, all this stuff comes from us all thinking we all have to be the same. No, we don't. There's differences for a reason, differences in gender, differences in the way a country is run, differences in citizenry. And that's a good thing.
That's beautiful.
It's a beautiful
Different
thing.
nations, different cultures.
But you see where this all comes from. This is all keeps tying back to the same thing. It all has to be this way. And if it's not this way, it's bad. No, it's not. And then they shame you and make you feel like you're the one with the problem. And so I don't want there to be a rival to the UN. I want people to rise up on their own in their own cities and communities, in their own states and counties, and say, this is what we believe in and we're willing to stand up for it. That's way more powerful than a single organization, because you have multiple voices in multiple languages all over the world. Different faiths, no faith, it doesn't matter. As long as your thing is to actually say, I want what's best for where I live, for everyone. No one's going to be happy with everything, right? But for the biggest good of our society as a whole in my community, that's what I want.
How much do you think all of it is spiritual? Would you say it all comes down to, so the UN and the New World Order or globalism, this whole agenda comes down to communism, or even communism comes down to spiritual? It's spiritual.
Yeah. Let's go back to what we talked about, healthy family formation. When you choose to marry and have children, why do people do that? Because there's something bigger inside of us that makes us want that. It's not us. It's, I've believed this my whole life, that God sent us to this earth to create families. That's the whole reason we're here. That's what I believe. I think a lot of people do feel that instinctually inside, but they push it aside, again, because it's not valued, or because it's considered religious or spiritual, or because it's considered bigoted or judgmental. And it's none of those things. We have a deep, innate desire to be in a family. If we were all born singly, they made a lot of movies and written a lot of books about this, sci-fi usually, of people being born in pods and all, raised by, that's not how society is supposed to be. And we all instinctually know that. So the desire to have a family, to create a family, to be in a family, to preserve your family, I don't think that comes from ourselves. I do think that's a spiritual thing. That comes from our spirit inside. There's nothing physical in your brain that's telling you, you need to have a child, get married and have a child. No, it's a spiritual thing. And I think that it's okay to say that.
So you want to tell me that this comes by default once we are being born and once we see the great example of our own family?
Or sometimes the poor example of your family. There are a lot of people that are born into less than ideal situations in their families. And I know a lot, I'm related to some, and they
know how not to do.
Yeah, and so they find some things. We always told our kids, my husband would always say this, I fully expect you to grow up and do things better than I did.
Of course.
Because that's the whole point, right? I mean, I'm not perfect. I don't expect you to do it exactly the way I did it. Do it better than me.
Yeah.
Take the best that I gave you and do more.
Be stronger, smarter.
And again, where does that come from? The desire to improve, the desire to be better. Where does that come from?
Definitely not from communism.
It comes from Jesus Christ, who was always telling us to be better. Think of others instead of yourself. Don't do things that are going to hurt other people. Do things that show God that you love him. That was his whole life. He never talked about, think about yourself. Did Jesus ever sit around talking about me, himself? No. How much do you even know about him? Not very much, because he didn't spend any time talking about himself.
He would have saved himself.
Yeah.
He wouldn't die on the cross.
Exactly. So I'm just thinking, anyone who talks a lot about themselves, a lot about what everything's going to do for that person, and doesn't talk about how it's going to benefit anyone else. They did this a lot with President Trump, if you notice. He only cares about himself. Every time I hear him speak, he talks about how I want to give this country back to you. This belongs to you. It's not about me.
The guy is a billionaire. Yeah. He could just live
So I'm just like, and not like this is supposed to be about President Trump. I'm just saying the whole thinking of all this kind of all goes together, of them all trying to say, see, he's selfish. The people who are selfish are saying someone else is selfish. The people who are bigots are saying someone else is a bigot. The people who are racist are the ones saying we're racist. It's all the same thing. Africans are poor and uneducated and stupid. That's that's so racist. That's so derogatory and condescending and just wrong. But they do it all the time.
The governor of New York told us last year, right?
Yeah.
That the black African Americans, the blacks, don't know what a computer is. What? How could you say
And
that?
she's still in office. So I'm just like,
It's
oh.
super racist.
And she's white, you know.
And she's white.
I mean, if we're playing the game right, she's white. She's not supposed to say things like, I don't believe that, but that's how they play. So yeah,
but it's not true in the first place.
No, if the people that are saying, it's like anything in the Inflation Reduction Act, it's exactly the opposite. It created inflation. Yeah. So everything, that healthy, whatever, what's the Obamacare thing called? What's the real name of it? Obamacare. Anyway, the real thing is healthy Americans. I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's talking about how Americans can have health or whatever. Well, it's exactly the opposite. It's like you have to pay if you don't have this certain coverage. I mean, it's just everything that they do is meant to distract you from what they're actually doing. And so it's the same thing with this. If they're saying you're selfish, they're the ones that are selfish. Mm-hmm. It's not selfish of me to marry a person, decide to have children together, and then assert my right to train and raise my children the way I want to, because I decided to have them. They are mine for a certain amount of time.
But it is selfish because you don't care about the nature.
I know.
4 kids. You're going to eat a lot of beef.
I know.
And they burp and fart a lot. A lot of methane.
And you know what I always say? I say, you know what? What I said earlier about as far as we need to value family, we need to value parenthood, we need to value life. We are a very anti-life, almost pro-death culture as far as we don't celebrate the wonder that it is that we have been created this way. We don't celebrate that because people think, well, that's talking about yourself or that's talking about God. Or no, we need to celebrate life. We don't celebrate life. Think about it. So many people are pro-abortion.
3,000 a day, right? 1 million a year.
People in this country who used to be considered pacifists are now pro-war. That's pro-death.
It's switched. Okay?
It's totally switched.
In the last decade.
So now you have people saying, you need to pay all this money to ban everything we don't like, to kill people in other countries that we don't like, and you need to
kill your own people.
To kill your own ones if you happen to make one. Because, well, that's what they say right now if you don't want them, but what they really mean is they don't want you having babies at all because it increases the population. So the people have gone on record saying that they think that, the population of the world, these elites think the population of the world should be like 500 people or something. It's something ridiculous, 500,000 or something. It's just like, because they want, and like you were saying, who's going to make all their food?
A golden billion, right?
Yeah.
Now it's 8.
Yeah.
We got to do something by 8.
Yeah. So the UN is all about population control, and that's why they're so heavy on abortion and sex working.
So you want to tell me that abortion is their linchpin? Mm-hmm. If you take off abortion, everything will fall?
Well, because you notice they cover it up with all sorts of words. Healthcare. They never come out and say abortion. They call it reproductive health care.
Women's rights.
Women's rights, sexual health. This is how to be sexually healthy, is to have access to abortion. And you know that we're right because when we try to get that term SRH out of the documents, they put up the biggest fight you would ever see. They howl. They can't. They start telling. I mean, these articles I was reading, they talk about at the end how the Western countries were so upset that Burundi stood up and against this thing they were trying to push through, and they're so upset that these traditional countries are getting in their way.
What's a no-go topic at the UN? What I mean by that is I was having Brenda Lapsack on my podcast, and she told me the story of a Trevor project.
Yep.
Once she brought up the Trevor project, they cut off her mic. Mm-hmm. What's the Trevor project of the
family?
UN? Excuse me?
Family.
You can bring family up.
No. They have a document on the family, and they're trying to take out the words mother and father out of a document on the family.
Do you think there is a specific family or a few families, the dynasties that control the UN?
I think that there's a lot of money being thrown around. I do think that there are philosophies and power people behind the scenes that we don't see, for sure. The average people working for those agencies, I don't think they have any idea. But I do think that whether there's certain families, I don't know for sure, but it doesn't seem surprising to me. Because they don't want that many people in charge. You have to remember that, right? So if there were a handful of 10 whatever groups of individuals or whatever that were pulling the strings, it wouldn't surprise me.
So if you would take NATO, the EU, on the other side is BRICS right now, which is becoming huge, right? Mm-hmm. But they're at the same time, well, they're kind of the adversaries, but the UN is the father of all.
I don't know if it's the father of all. I think they're players on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think even in their world that they want one group to be the most powerful. I don't think they can handle that. I think that it could be, again, like you said, the people behind the scenes, the real puppet masters. It could be them. I don't know, but the thinking comes from somewhere, and I don't think it's from a lot of people's heads. I think it's a few, and it permeates all these organizations, and that's where all the money's coming from.
Were you surprised that Trump won the elections?
I honestly, I was.
Why? Because lots of people voted for him, or the reason is you were surprised because the elections work. Were you surprised that it worked?
No,
because lots of people were telling the sort of like, there's no way elections work at all.
No, because okay, so there's a man that I followed a while back, and I still try to follow him. His name is Seth Keshel. Have you heard of him?
No.
He is a retired military intelligence officer. And since 2020, he's been doing presentations. He's kind of calmed down now, but for the couple years there, he was doing presentations all over the place. And he used his way to analyze data and got a team put together, and they would show each state by county, and he would give them a color: green, yellow, red. Red is, green is no detectable voter fraud. Yellow is, there's a good amount of voter fraud. Red is rampant voter fraud. California, like all those big counties, completely red. San Francisco, San Diego, LA, San Diego. So I was very happy. I wasn't surprised that he won ideologically, but I was very happy that he won with the fraud and the cheating that goes on. For instance, like I said, back in 2020, I think I said to you before we started this, I was a poll observer at my polling station. And the county supervisor of elections in that county had a rule that you had to post your results within, I think it was 5 minutes of the polls closing at 8 o'clock. We had a line of people, at least 100 people still waiting to vote. This was 2020 when everybody was, mail-in voting. People still were coming to vote in person. We had buckets full of unopened ballots that people had dropped off in the back of the room. They had provisional ballots that people had cast that day for people who just registered and voted that same day. None of those were counted. Results were posted. This state, if you've lived here long enough, you talk to people, most people I know in this state did not vote for our governor. Do you know anybody that's voted for Nancy Pelosi? I don't. All the people who've been in politics for decades, how are they still there? Nothing gets it done any better. So I was not surprised he won ideologically. I was very surprised he won the cheating. The cheating is terrible in this country, and it's from the mail-in ballots, and it's also the machines, but it's also the way things are run at the polling locations. The polling locations, in a lot of cases, cover too large of an area. Like I was in Orange County before. Orange County is too big. And there's so many people that live there, like it really should probably be split so that it could be managed better. But I think ideologically people are ready to take care of our country, and that's what he stands for. And despite all the things they say about him, that really is what he's standing for. And so that I was very happy talking to a lot of people I've talked to. There are people who still thought that the other side should have won, but interestingly enough, they didn't like the candidate herself. They wanted abortion. That's what they all say. I want my rights. So you want the right to kill life. So again, like I said, it's kind of a pro-death culture. That side is abortion is such a central pillar. And I don't understand it other than the fact that it goes along with this. It's anti-family. It's me culture. It's not family culture. It's not we culture. It's me culture. It's all about me. What's best for me. What's best for my life, for my body, for my choice. It's all my body, my choice. Think about that statement. It's all about me. Mm-hmm. Think about what we're taught as Christians. It's not about you. It's about all of God's children, right? It's very different. And it all comes back. It's the same thinking that they do here all the time.
Or the body of the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so abortion is a linchpin.
It totally is. And there's a lot of money in it. A lot of money in it. I mean, IPPF, the International Planned Parenthood Federation, has a seat at a lot of, I don't know how many, but I know they have seats at some of the meetings at the UN. They shouldn't. We don't.
Do you think Musk and Ramaswamy are going to defund Planned Parenthood? Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not going to end well.
Why should we be funding that? Again, people are making these decisions in the federal government. A lot of times it's from bureaucracies, people we didn't vote for, who are making decisions. They can't be fired. I used to be in the public education system as a teacher for a couple of years. And you cannot, it's very, very, very difficult to be fired as a public employee. That needs to stop.
Why? Because the union?
It's just the union. Yes, the teachers union is very powerful, and they've put things in place. Like there was a teacher's aide that was working in one of the other classrooms, and he just wasn't very good at his job. He didn't follow directions very well. He would be out at recess trying to help, and the kids would just be climbing all over him and punching him, like pretending to fight. He wasn't a respected figure to the kids. And he was just not very helpful in the classroom. So the teacher was exasperated. She was a longtime teacher. And they just kept moving him around to a different classroom. And I remember asking as a brand new teacher, why can't they just get rid of him? I mean, clearly he's not doing his job. Like at any other store, you'd say, it's not working out. I'm going to lay you off. Even teachers who are accused of horrific things like abuse, sexual abuse of students, they just move them.
To another school? Mm-hmm. Pedophiles?
It's happened many times. So there's something broken in our public employees system. So, I know you've spoken with Rebecca Friedrichs and her work with getting, she was the forerunner of GET decision that eventually came with Janice like a year and a half later, where now public employees don't have to be in a union. Mm-hmm. But the unions are really powerful. And so they obviously have something in their agreements that makes it next to impossible to get rid of a federal employee. My kids, when they were going to school back in the day, there was a teacher, fourth grade teacher, that was just an old battle axe kind of teacher. She was just mean. She would belittle the kids. And every parent knew you do not want your kid in that class. So I did whatever I could to finagle and make sure my kids, none of them got her. But she was just verbally abusive in a lot of cases. She got her full pension, which those pensions aren't affordable either. We can't pay for those. We're going to go bankrupt. We are bankrupt because of a lot of the public employees' pensions, which are way too high. That's another subject for another day. But it's just part of the whole corruption of when you have a system that you can't audit, you can't change, you can't pull people out and put people in.
Well, the problem with pensions is if your birth rate is 1.7, 1.9, right? So, and the inflation, and government has a track record of not doing great with money. Mm-hmm. That's when you have problems with pension. It's all over the world. Lithuania is bankrupt.
Yeah,
because of the same reason.
Well, and when I was teaching, I remember thinking like so many teachers, even the 2 years I was teaching, it wasn't very long. People would leave and get sucked into the administration at the district level for different reasons, and they chose it. But I remember thinking, how many people work at the district? Because they don't do that much. I mean, yes, there are some things they do, but they don't do that much. And there's so many people at that level, and this happens throughout government. There's so many people in these bureaucracies and admins and whatever, and do we need all those paper pushers? No, in most cases, you don't need most of them. It's kind of like Elon Musk's ex.
Oh, yes.
He went in and got rid of 80% of the staff, and it's working better than it was before.
It works.
But now people are trying to say like, oh, it's full of Nazis. I'm like, okay, I'm on X, and I haven't seen any Nazis. I don't know what you're talking about. No, you can just say what you want to say now, and that's kind of a good thing.
April, you're a woman of reason. I'm going to ask you this question. So, do you consider abortions in 2024 as kind of the same thing as the things that were mentioned in the Bible as a children's sacrifice?
I think abortion is a very cleverly worded, protected practice that aims to make a woman feel like she has control, but it really is being controlled by whoever is pushing that on her. Whether it's her partner, whether it's her parent, whether it's someone else in her life, her job, who's making her feel like you can't have a baby right now. And so in that case, they are sacrificing children for convenience.
For a career, so it's for the money.
Mm-hmm. Or, it's embarrassing. You can't have a baby, you're 15. There's all sorts of reasons. So are they sacrificing children? Yes. Is it similar to the biblical child sacrifice? I think it has similar connotations. I don't know if it's always for the same reasons. I think in today's world, it's more, I think there are probably people who do that. I mean, it's like, isn't it the Church of Satan who wants to abort babies as part of their rituals? That's what I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there are people that do that. I think abortion in general, though, is just women being taken advantage of under the guise of having control.
Is there anything that we did not cover about the UN that you wanted to share?
I guess I would just share some of the good language of this last thing about the reproductive health and this resolution on the family. So it says, powerful Western countries howled and accused traditional delegations of acting in bad faith. The first draft of this resolution contained the pro-abortion, again, they always fight about abortion, so it is a linchpin, contained the pro-abortion term reproductive health. So that's why the traditional countries said you should not have reproductive health, which they know now because we've done a lot of work. Our NGO, a lot of other NGOs done a lot of work to teach them when they say reproductive health, it means abortion.
Equal abortion. Mm-hmm.
A couple years ago, they were using the term women and girls in all their diversity. We had to teach them that means trans.
Say that
women and girls in all their diversity. That is code language. And I read that other code where they said they use coded language. They're admitting it. They use terms that are ambiguous, and then they know what they mean, but the person they're saying it doesn't know what. So we've had to have education meetings sometimes with new delegates just to teach them what all these things actually mean. Because it sounds great, right? Reproductive health. Oh, I can have access to birth control if I need it. Okay, great. No, it means abortion. And you notice they're howling about they can't have abortion and a resolution on the family. So then it says, the Nigerian delegate said all UN member states have an obligation to defend the family in line with international human rights law. Family is not only the natural and fundamental group unit of society, it is the building block of civilization.
Amen.
The Russian delegation praised the resolution because it included a focus on the international legal obligations of countries to the family as a unit for the first time. It said that. So they have an obligation to form families, is what we've been talking about, and for referring to the importance of maternal health for the family. It says, while traditional countries were elated by the outcome, Western countries were bitterly disappointed that the resolution did not include abortion language or recognition of homosexual couples as families. Why do they push so hard for homosexual couples to be a family? Can you guess?
Because they cannot
with everything we talked about. Huh?
Because they cannot procreate.
Yeah, they can't have kids. So of course they want that to be the new definition of a family.
But they can adopt.
You want to have trans people get married. They can't actually have children because who knows what kind of organs they've damaged or whatever. So yeah, they want you to adopt the children. Who's going to make the children? Like you said, who's going to grow the food? Who's going to grow the children? If they're all had surgeries and been castrated and they've taken drugs, who's going to have the babies? So
no one's going to pollute the air.
No. And then it says a U.S. delegate accused traditional countries of promoting a, quote, and here's the name calling again, anti-LGBTQI whatever agenda, and attempting to redefine the family. Redefine the family. They said the traditional countries who want it to be the traditional family were redefining the family. So like I said,
they want to keep the definition
everything
of
they say is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to
Gaslighting.
redefine the family. They're trying to redefine the family. It should be same-sex couples. It should be whatever we decide. So same thing as when it happened with gay marriage. Marriage is no longer marriage if anybody can do it.
I can marry to myself.
Right.
Proposition 3.
You can be married to 3 people at once if you want. I mean, I'm not against gay people. I'm just saying words have to have a meaning.
It's not about the gay people.
No.
It's like the LGBT parades. How do they call them? It's not about the gay people or lesbians.
That's just exhibitionism. Those parades are exhibitionism. Literally, people are walking down the street naked.
Or they are dressed like horses,
Mm-hmm.
dogs.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? That's
Have you seen the ones
perversion.
driving down the street on their bikes and they're totally naked?
Yeah.
A bunch of men.
What does it have to do with gays? I know people
It doesn't.
that are gay.
No, and they're not like
normal
that.
People,
No, I
like
know.
me and you.
I do too. Yeah.
They don't dress like a horse.
Well, there's a difference between being same-sex attracted and being an LGBT advocate. They're not the same.
Not the same.
There are a lot of people that are same-sex attracted. Like I said, I would not have a problem with a gay president. I really wouldn't. If that man or woman was dedicated to the prosperity and future of America as a solid, prosperous nation with family-centric, sovereign from other nations, interference, that has my vote. I don't care. It's just like the one thing President Trump has taught me is that America first is always me. America has to come first. Our money can't be going to people coming across the border. It can't be going to Ukraine. It can't be going to the Israel conflicts. It can't be doing this stuff anymore. We need to take care of our own people. And so if the president's going to do that, I'll vote for him or her.
Oh, you're such a bigot.
I don't need a woman president. Even when I said, "Do you want a woman president?" I said, I don't really care. Is the person going to do what's best for this country? Or is this person going to push abortion? You notice Kamala was always super strong on that because she's just like them. They're howling because you didn't include abortion. You didn't have abortion language. And these traditional countries are saying, well, we don't want abortion. We told you we don't want abortion. We told you repeatedly we don't want abortion. And you keep pushing it. Which is why that delegate from Suriname was so tired. She's, I'm just so tired. She was
all about sex, abortion.
All sex. I was talking to an Argentine delegate several years ago, before they had their new president, who's now doing all wonderful things. And I said, everything here is about sex. Like, why is it like that? He goes, well, if we didn't have these problems, you wouldn't have a job. I said, this is not my job. I have a family. If you guys weren't doing all of this, I could stay home with my family. Instead, I'm over here.
Stop doing all this.
Yeah, stop doing all these things because I could go home and take care of my family. But that's what you were mentioning earlier about why there's not a group to oppose the UN. I think because all of us as households have to realize we have more power than we think. And your power comes from you standing for what you believe in and teaching your children and strengthening your family as a unit to seek for the good of everyone, to seek for the good that God wants us to have, right? That's what we need to be doing. And we need to stop this one issue thing of, I believe in this, right? No, we need to come together and say, this is how we feel. I know this is good for society, and therefore I'm going to stand firm in that. And when you do that, more people say, wow, that was brave. I'm going to do that too. And it spreads. That's why President Trump was reelected. I honestly believe that because people saw the outright evil, the nonsense, the gaslighting. They saw it all. And they said, I am done. I want someone who's going to take care of our country. I want someone who's going to make it so I could feel safe to go out at night. I can go visit someone in a certain city and not be concerned that I can't go out because something might happen. I might get robbed. I might get assaulted. I might get my car stolen. I mean, all these things that government is supposed to do for you. I think that I do honestly believe that's why his message resonated. And all the other side had was abortion. That's all they had. You notice they would never come off of that. That was their number one issue. And you see it over and over again, all the things that I read to you. Abortion is the linchpin. If you take that away, they have nothing left. Abortion, and then a second behind that is gender. But all that is pushed toward is to separate you from God and to separate you from control over your own body. Because if you follow the abortion, have abortions, or you have these chemicals, or you get castrated, whatever you're going to do, you eliminate your ability to reproduce and to have a family. Do you see why they're doing it? That's why I said the F word at the UN is the family. The family is the biggest threat. So the best way you can fight this is strengthen your family. Teach your children about family, why it's important. Teach your children to create their own families. Encourage them to do that and show them how to do it in a healthy way. Because you need healthy family formation, right? Because they'll always say, well, I had an abusive father when I was growing up. I had a mother and father and they were terrible. I agree. That happens. We need to get governments and NGOs and everybody involved to put their true effort and their compassion and desire into helping their citizens create families. Period.
Amen. April, I have the same question on my podcast that is the last one. So let's have two assumptions with you. Assumption number one is the President of the United States, his position is he's the most powerful human being on planet Earth. The second assumption is you become one. You become the President of the US. Once you do so, you've got this Secret Service at your disposal. They come to you and say, Mrs. President, we love you, we respect you, you're the president now. We as Secret Service know all the answers in the world, right? You ask us, we give you an honest answer. What would be your first question?
My question about the world?
Whatever you want to know. They know everything. They will give you the truth.
I would want to know, what strings do I have to pull to get all of this to crumble?
Would you do it?
So that families can truly prosper and that God can have his rightful role in our lives.
What if they tell you, here's the instruction. If you do this, you have 10 times more possibility you're getting killed. Would you do that?
If it's going to have that outcome, I would have to.
You would risk your life?
I would have to. If they could tell me how to, because civilization is not flourishing right now. And that's why a lot of countries are pushing back. You had the new government in Argentina. You have new government in, I think, El Salvador. You have some of the
amazing.
You have some of the new Sweden. Other countries are starting to reject some of this gender stuff, and
Netherlands, Italy.
And so people around the world, like that's the spiritual part you were talking about. I believe is their spirit longs for freedom and prosperity. They want to live their lives. They don't want to deal with this. I don't want to go to the UN and deal with this. I almost like when I think about going back, I just get tired. Like that delegate, I'm just like, can't you guys just let us do things that we want to do? Like, why do you have to keep pushing? But they do. And so somebody has to push back. And I got involved with this initially because I said, I'm not going down without a fight. And so I believe in my family. I want to protect my own family. Therefore, I need to help other people protect their families. And if that means that I have to open myself up to attacks, even hopefully not something really dangerous. I think if you were in that position, you would have to do that because that's why you got elected, was to protect your people. I mean, you protect your family. I'm here to protect my family. So why wouldn't I protect my country if I'm in charge of a whole country? That's your job.
Yeah, because 70 million told, we want you to represent us, our values. April, thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah.
How many grandchildren do you have?
We have 4 and 2 on the way.
So God bless you.
Thank
God
you.
bless all your family. God bless your kids and your grandkids.
Thank you.
That are now being born and the future grandkids as well.
Yes.
And I appreciate all the work that you do for the better of the society. And just like I said in the very beginning, if the US falls in many aspects, the other countries will fall as well.
That's true.
I do care for the US because I live here. And I do care for my home country because this is the country I was born in. If you fail here, my country is going to fail there.
Yes.
So I appreciate all your hard work. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
From the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you for watching this whole episode. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Leave a comment below and share this episode with your friends, peers, and loved ones. May God, Jesus Christ, bless you and your whole family.